And now, please join me in welcoming Sam Daley-Harris.
I actually have to see if my mother's here yet. Not yet? Excuse me. As you can imagine, it's an immense honor to be here talking with you this evening. She's on the way, don't worry. And I have to tell you, when I was connecting with people from the neighborhood when I was growing up for this, and from elementary school and junior high, and high school, and the university, and ZBT, and the symphony, and North Miami High School, and North Miami Beach High School, I kept thinking, it's like my bar mitzvah all over again. And so it is a great thrill to be here. And as soon as my mother, who got stuck in traffic, and there are a lot of people, if it took you more than an hour and a half to get here tonight, would you raise your hand? Yeah. See, the ones that took 2 hours, they're still on the road and they'll be here in a few minutes. I'm grateful to the University of Miami. Let me just tell you how this came about, basically. My wife has worked with the Children's Defense Fund for 25 years. And after Hillary Clinton was chairman of the board of CDF, Donna Shalala was chair of the board of CDF. And a year ago, November, was their 40th anniversary. And I was at the reception before the 40th anniversary event and met Donna Shalala. And I was at the beginning of a 30-city book tour, and Donna Shalala and I started to talk. And she said, "Do we know you at the university?" I said, "No, not really." And so that set a whole series of events in play that led to this lecture. So I'm grateful to the university, to the alumni department, particularly to Adlar Garcia, who's worked so hard, and others to make this event the success that it is. I'm going to start with 2 quotes. I actually spoke at a church in Pasadena in October, and I said, I'm going to start with 2 Mark quotes. And I assume they thought of the Bible, but this is Mark Twain and Mark Hatfield. Mark Hatfield was a Republican senator from Oregon who said, "We stand by as children starved by the millions because we lack the will to eliminate hunger. Yet we have found the will to develop missiles capable of flying over the polar cap and landing within a few hundred feet of their target. This is not innovation. It is a profound distortion of humanity's purpose on Earth." Listen to that again. He said, "We stand by as children starved by the millions because we lack the will to eliminate hunger. Yet we have found the will to develop missiles capable of flying over the polar cap and landing within a few hundred feet of their target. This is not innovation. It is a profound distortion of humanity's purpose on Earth." And so I really say that because I know that everyone in this room is committed to correcting that distortion of humanity's purpose. And hopefully I'll give you some ideas of how we can better do that. So thank you for being here. The others, purportedly from Mark Twain, who supposedly said, "The 2 most important days of your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why." The 2 most important days of your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. And I would say that in a quiet moment, I think we'd agree that the why has something to do with giving back, making a contribution, leaving the campsite cleaner than we found it. But that's all smothered by layers of cynicism and hopelessness and discouragement. But when that can be released, the natural desire to make a difference can come forward. I want to go over the main messages from the book, which is, in a sense, the main messages from this talk. The first one is that this is obvious. Most people feel cynical and hopeless about making a difference with their voices as citizens. If you do not feel hopeless and cynical, you are not normal. Normal people feel hopeless and cynical about making a difference with their voices as citizens. The second message is, for the last 35 years, I've seen people make a profound difference with their voice as citizens. The tough part, the challenge, is finding an organization that can really empower you, that really can encourage you. In other words, most organizations give us kindergarten curriculum. Click here, sign this petition, get us a check, now you're done. And you should do that. You shouldn't stop doing that, but you know that's insufficient. And so I have asked the university to allow some tabling at this event for organizations that give more than kindergarten. And I'm going to go over what more than kindergarten looks like in a few minutes, but some of the groups here are Results on global and domestic poverty. Another of the groups that's here is Citizens Climate Lobby on climate change. There's another group that's not here, and in fact, if I say something about them right now that you find interesting, you might give me your name and contact information, and I'll get it to them. It's called the Peace Alliance, and the main piece of legislation they're working on is the Youth Promise Act, which would fund violence prevention programs in communities all around the United States. Since I'm not going to mention them again, I want to say one thing about them. One of the ingredients is that they have conference calls, these groups, once a month with a guest speaker and Q&A and grassroots victories and the like. And I was on their call last Saturday, and the guest speaker was an author who writes on youth incarceration. It's really scandalous where the U.S. stands on youth incarceration. And she was mentioning that this legislation they're working on is based on evidence-based programs. Like, you can show the evidence that these programs work in reducing violence. And she said, I have to laugh because there is no evidence that shows that incarceration works in terms of reducing violence and criminality. But so if you're interested in that group, which is not tabling, you could give me your contact information. I'm going to start with my story. And this is a story that starts in Miami. I was born here in 1946 and lived here for 33 years. And I tell this all around the world, really, but not in Miami that much. And I have, as you heard, I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in music. I shouldn't do this, but would my percussion instructor at the University of Miami stand up for one moment? Fred Wickstrom, thank you very much. Now, if I keep doing this will go all night. But anyway, I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in music, and I played in the Miami Philharmonic in percussion for 12 years, and I taught high school music. And then I started a citizen lobby group on ending global poverty. And a lot of times, it's like, what was that about? And what motivated that kind of change? And when I look back in my life, there's several experiences rooted in Miami, and I'm going to go over them right now. In 1964, it'll be 51 years ago in June, I graduated from high school, Southwest Miami High School. Yeah, and at the ceremony, I played timpani in the orchestra at graduation. And just before the ceremony, a flute player came back to the percussion section and told me that a high school fraternity brother, a year younger, had died the day before in a tractor-trailer accident in Georgia. It was her neighbor, so she knew it before I did. But I would say I was 17, and when I was 17, I thought I had forever. I mean, mortality was an irrelevant concept. But during the mourning period and the funeral, after the funeral, I went with his younger brother to collect his report card from his homeroom teacher. It really began to dawn on me that I had 17 more minutes or months or years. And so the questions of purpose started to come up. Why am I here? What am I here to do? What's my purpose? No answers, but they're starting to come up. 4 years later, college graduation day, 1968, Robert Kennedy is assassinated right around that time. And it's another one of those, what is this life? What is this death? Why am I here? What am I here to do? No answers, but the questions are getting pretty clear now. 9 years later, I'm a little slow, I'm invited to a presentation on ending world hunger through the Hunger Project. And I go to it. This is really important. I go to this thing thinking that hunger's inevitable because there are no solutions, because if there were solutions, somebody would have done something by now. But I get to this thing, and early on, it's quite obvious there's no mystery to growing food or clean water or basic health or sanitation, literacy. None of that stuff is mysterious. I'm not hopeless about the perceived lack of solutions. I'm hopeless about human nature. People will just never get around to doing the things that can be done. And there's one human nature I have some control over, my own, and my questions. Why am I here? What am I here to do? So I start to get involved. So this is the end of the story. In 1978 and 1979, I speak to 7,000 high school students in Miami, where I lived, in Los Angeles, where I moved. And before I go into the first classroom, I read some statements from Jimmy Carter's Commission on Hunger and others calling for the political will to end hunger. So I asked 7,000 high school students what the name of their member of Congress was. Who doesn't know this story? To anyone who doesn't know this story, want to guess out of 7,000 students the number that knew the name of their member of Congress? 10. Okay. Optimist on the front row. Okay. No, actually, 200 knew, fewer than 3%. 6,800 didn't know, just over 97%. And I started this grassroots lobby results out of this gap between the calls for the political will on the one hand and the lack of basic information on who represented us in Washington on the other. And so that's really the story of how I even got from one thing to another. And so I'm going to tell 5 other very short stories from the road, from this like 30-city tour. But before I do, I want to ask my mother, who just walked in, to stand up for a moment. Mom, stand up, please, for a moment, yes? And my wife, Shannon. Shannon, for a moment. Yes, higher, great, thank you. And she's going to kill me. My daughter, Sophie, if you will stand up, there you go. Great, great. Okay. So these are 5 stories. They're very, very brief. They're about our predicament, and they all come from my recent trip. Excuse me. The first one is I spoke in the fall of 2013 on 18 college campuses, but on 15 of them, I told the students that I started results after I asked 7,000 who your congressman is in high school, and only fewer than 3% knew. So on 15 campuses, I asked the same question 35 years later. This is the LBJ School at the University of Texas, the Hubert Humphrey Institute, University of Minnesota, Oberlin. You want to guess the percent on these 15 campuses that knew the name? How much? 2%. No, actually, it went up a bit. 10% knew, 90% didn't. So wait, so last March, and where I live now in Princeton, New Jersey, there's a senior citizen lecture series. And I spoke at it, and the person that got me the gig said, you know, they get 200 seniors every 2 weeks coming. I said, no, 200? I don't. So I went a month early to check it out, and surely there were 200 in the room. And the moderator said, in 2 weeks, we'll hear from so-and-so, and 2 weeks after that, we'll hear from Sam Daley-Harris on reclaiming our democracy, healing the break between people and government, and there were chuckles in the room. And the moderator said, yeah, this is something we have to work on. And my takeaway, my kids do this at the dinner table, they do this line. My takeaway is that the students are kind of oblivious, and the seniors buy this one sample, are, what shall we say, normal, cynical, a bit cynical kind of thing. Next story. I spoke at Harvard last year, and I had the opportunity to meet a brilliant professor of organizing. I mean, he worked with Cesar Chavez for 10 years in the 70s. He was the brains behind organizing for Obama. Brilliant guy. We talked for 20 minutes. He never heard of Results or Citizens Climate Lobby. And he said, well, how do you do that? And why do you do it that way? And how do people respond when you ask them to do that? And at the end of 20 minutes, he looks at me and he says, yeah, but Congress is really dysfunctional. Now, this is like a major, I mean, truly, I'm not putting him down in any way. But I said to him, yes, Congress is really dysfunctional, but last year it appropriated $1.65 billion for the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. I said, yes, Congress is really dysfunctional, but last year it appropriated $700 million for global maternal and child health programs globally. I said, Congress is really dysfunctional, but if you roll up your sleeves, do your homework, and get in there, you can make big things happen rather than write it off. Last story. I love this one the best. Last April, I spoke at Rutgers, which is a state university in New Jersey. And before the lecture, there were groups of students sitting at tables, and I would go to a table and they'd introduce themselves. I'd take a question, and I'd go to the next table. Same thing. I get to the last table, the last student says, I'm in an honors futures class. With a view to 50 years in the future, what's the most important issue we could work on? I said, well, my friends in climate change tell me if we don't deal with that, we're toast. And I said, my friends in campaign finance reform say if we don't deal with that, nothing's going to change. And my friends in global poverty tell me it's a blight on humanity. But for me, the most important issue is why so few of us see ourselves as change makers. If we could fix that one, there would be a barrage of people coming into all of these issues. So hopefully these next bits will help us out on this. So I'm going to go over at first a couple of victories. I mean, I want to prove that people can make a difference. And what matters most are lives saved, illiteracy wiped out, that kind of thing. But what I really want to get to, although I'm going to show a little of that in a moment, what I really want to get to is how do you empower people? How do you encourage people so that they don't feel so hopeless? So let me start with this. Results started lobbying in 1984 on child survival programs. Things like UNICEF was reporting that 41,000 children were dying every day from largely preventable, underlying preventable, malnutrition and disease, things like measles coupled with malnutrition or pneumonias and other preventable illnesses. And we lobbied in '86 to get the Child Survival Fund increased from $25 million to $75 million successfully. And that year, the volunteers generated 90 editorials, not letters or op-eds, where the newspapers said this should be done. And at the end of the campaign, we would send a cover letter and 4 editorials to this mailing list of Congress and administration, a cover letter and 5 editorials. The last batch of the 90 editorials, the head of UNICEF, in a handwritten note in the margin, wrote this. This is what he wrote by hand. He said, I want to convey my heartfelt thanks for the unflagging and satisfyingly successful efforts of Results on behalf of mother and children everywhere. I thank you in my mind weekly, because he used to get these packets of editorials every few weeks. I thank you in my mind weekly, if not more often, for what you and your colleagues are accomplishing, but I thought I should do it at least once this year in writing. And we lobbied for this program for 30 years, year in and year out, and it's gone from, as I mentioned before, $25 million to $700 million a year today. Now, when we started lobbying, UNICEF reported 41,000 deaths a day under 5 preventable children around the world. And the latest report from September is that 41,000 is plummeted to 17,000 a day. Now, results didn't vaccinate any kids, didn't do any of the health part, but we're at the center of the advocacy that would allow a thing like that to happen. And so in a New York Times article 2 years ago, the deputy executive director of UNICEF from several years ago said, to a great extent, it was because of the receptivity created by results that the US funding for child survival increased so dramatically starting in the mid-'80s, and that led many other countries to come on board. And in the same article, the president of the World Bank said, results is such a lean and efficient model that nobody knows about them. They're incredibly dedicated and very knowledgeable about the issues. It's remarkable how much they've done and how few people have any idea about it. So I'm telling you about some victories, but I really want to get in a moment to, like, how do you do that? How do people get out of the stands and, you know, onto the playing field? One more. In 1987, we generated volunteers, 100 editorials, again, not letters or op-eds, in a successful campaign to pass the first legislation on microloans, microcredit. And in August of that year, Results volunteers arranged for 28 editorial writers to join conference calls, 14 the first hour, 14 the second hour, with Muhammad Yunus of the Grameen Bank, and this was 19 years before he received the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, how do you get a unknown person, Muhammad Yunus, doing an unknown intervention, microcredit, in a little discussed country, Bangladesh? How do you get 28 editorial writers on the phone with this guy 19 years before? And that's the question I want to get to in a moment, the secret sauce of empowerment. When we started lobbying in '86, 1 million around the world had access to a microloan. By 2012, 124 million of the very poor had access to it. And as you heard earlier, after he got the Nobel Peace Prize, Professor Yunus said no other organization has been as critical a partner to seeing to it that microcredit is used as a tool to eradicate poverty and empower women than Results and Results Ed Fund's Microcredit Summit campaign. So what does it take to empower citizens like this? So there's one thing that I'm going to start with, and I'm going to get to some others in a moment, and that's focus. Like, if an organization just offers you mouse clicks, well, that's fine, but that's not deep enough. If an organization offers you something deeper, but it's 2 months on this, and it's 2 months on that, and then they change 2 months on this, and then there's no focus, and you can't get deep in, with your own understanding and your own ability. So it's really important to focus. I want to talk about a more recent example of this kind of work. In 2007, I got a phone call from a friend in Results, his name is Marshall Saunders, who said to me, he lives in San Diego, he said, I saw Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth 3 times in 10 days. And then I went to Nashville and I learned to do the slideshow. And then I went home to San Diego and I led it 43 times. But early on, I realized I was giving people 98% the problem and 2% what they could do about it. And that they couldn't buy enough Priuses or change enough light bulbs to make up for what the government was or wasn't doing. And so he even said, one morning I was reading the paper and I saw this article that said Congress had appropriated $18 billion the day before in fossil fuel subsidies, and I got 18 people to change their light bulb that day. He said, this is never going to work. So he asked me to coach him in starting Citizens Climate Lobby. And so we worked for 7 years. It's grown to 225 chapters in the US and Canada. And I want you to look at this carefully. Last year, The CCL volunteers in the US and Canada had 2,253 letters to the editor published. That's eye-popping empowerment, and that's up from 36 in 2010. In last year, their volunteers in the US and Canada had 1,086 meetings, face-to-face meetings with members of Congress, Canadian Parliament, or their staff, up from 105 in 2010. So if you want greatness from volunteers, you have to provide them with a great structure of support. And one piece of that puzzle is a monthly national conference call. And so I'm going to talk about the monthly conference call. I've had lectures where I've talked about stuff, and people go out thinking, well, that guy said we need to do conference calls. Yeah, but you could do them in a disempowering way or an empowering way. So here's how you do them in a disempowering way or an empowering way. One example, the guest speaker. Most organizations, if they have a webinar or a conference call, they don't have a guest speaker. This month they have staff, and then next month it'll be staff, and the month after it'll be staff. They don't invite a member of Congress, an outside expert kind of thing. And if they do, the other disempowering way is to have them talk the whole time with no time for questions and answers, like I'm doing right now, but we'll have time in a moment. The empowering way to do it is to insist that the speaker talks for 10 minutes. You have 15 minutes for interaction and engagement. Another segment, most groups would not have grassroots victories. You know, the group in Boise says last week we met with they wouldn't even do it. And if they do it, the disempowering way continues to be they don't include the struggles. So, for example, if someone gets up and says, we met with our member of Congress yesterday, it was a blast, we can't wait to do it again, but they left out that it took 11, they leave out that it took 11 phone calls to get the meeting. They had to meet with the district director first, and their knees were knocking before. If they leave all that out, then people around the country are listening going, we've made 2 calls, maybe we should give up on this, I don't think this is. But if they include it, people are going, we've made 2 calls, I guess we've got 9 more to go, let's get on it and get in. So you have to include the struggle, and then people will be with you as you get to the victory. Another segment that groups would leave out is a section to learn to be more articulate, to actually be able to speak up kind of thing. Now, if they don't leave it out, they might do a role play, and this is the next disempowering way. They might do a role play, and it's terrible. It's awful. But all they can say after the role play, you know, to a member of Congress or a role play to an editor or something, all they can say is, thank you so much for volunteering. You were so courageous. No, it was awful. You got to actually do some coaching. I was commenting I talked to a journalism class this afternoon here on campus, and one of the students said, do you think your music training helped you? Well, this is one place, because you ought to always listen to a phrase and say how you could improve the phrase or how the line could be improved, and you take it over to listening to someone speak on a role play, and it all passes along. But if there's real coaching, real insights on how to make it better, then it's really empowering and it makes a difference. So I'm going to close with this one excerpt from the book, and then we'll take some Q&A. Actually, it's an excerpt and a quote. And then I'll be doing some book signing for anyone who's interested, and there'll be the tables for these organizations after the Q&A. So I want to read this excerpt from one of the new chapters in the book. And this is a woman. I want to describe her to you. Her name is Ellie Sparks, and she lived at this time, when she's talking, in Richmond, Virginia. And at this time, her congressman was Eric Cantor, the House Majority Leader, and her newspaper was the Richmond Times-Dispatch. And she said when she joined, she was suffering from climate trauma. She would read Bill McKibben's book, Earth, and she would weep at home, and she would weep at work. And then she joined Citizens Climate Lobby, and 18 months later, she's co-leading a workshop on getting relationships with your member of Congress and editorial writers. So the month after her workshop at their conference, she's on their conference call telling about the workshop. So this is Ellie speaking. She says, our director, Mark Reynolds, likes to say, we're betting the farm on relationships. Then he says, we need to build relationships with members of Congress and editorial writers. Most of us CCL volunteers have never done that before. What in the world does a relationship with a member of Congress look like? How do we connect with an editorial page editor? Some of us have found models for those relationships in other parts of our lives. Gary in Boston uses the model of a work relationship. My relationship model is different. I adore romantic relationships, so I use romance as my model. That first meeting with the editorial writer, it's like a blind date, only you've decided beforehand you're gonna marry this fellow. You're gonna be sweet and interesting, not too intense, but if it doesn't work with the editor, you're gonna marry one of his friends at the newspaper. The business editor, environment writer, city editor, someone at this paper will find you interesting and compelling. It's just a matter of being persistent until you find the right connection. Who do you know that talks like this? I see the relationship with a member of Congress as an arranged marriage. If you live in her district, the member's aide has to meet with you. That's what our congressman's ledge director told us in January. This is many Januaries ago. Since then, we've met 9 times with the legislative director. We schedule 45-minute meetings with him. He keeps us for well over an hour. He doesn't want us to leave. Why? Because a good arranged marriage starts out cold and slowly heats up over time. That's different than a love match, which starts out hot and slowly cools down. I see the editorial page writer as a painter. His canvas is the editorial pages. His palette is filled with letters to the editor, op-eds, editorials. I'm his muse, model, and assistant. Who said that to you recently? I want him to fill his canvas with colors that I like, so I'll have my group send 3 to 5 letters to the editor whenever the opportunity arises. The more colors I put on his palette, the better chance of having him pick 1 or 2 of my favorite ones. That's how you get 2,253 letters to the editor in 12 months. This is the genius. This is like postdoc citizen empowerment and transformation. During our conference, this is about 2 years ago, I met with 20 congressional offices. I met with many folks whose view of the world was very different than mine. Going into their offices was hard. I had to let go of a lot of emotional baggage. I could no longer judge them or hold hostility in my heart toward them. I had to let go of my fear of climate change and my fear that they wouldn't listen to me. I had to center myself in love. Releasing fear and centering in love, this is sacred and profound work. Now, don't forget, she started at climate trauma and got to sacred and profound. And I think if I asked normal people to meet with 20 congressional offices, at first they'd call it dirty work or hard work or I don't know what, and not necessarily sacred and profound. And I'm saying that's what we need to get to see the sacredness and profoundness of being citizens. There's this quote I love from Apollo astronaut Rusty Schweickart, who said, "We aren't passengers on spaceship Earth. We're the crew. We aren't residents on this planet. We're citizens." The difference in both cases is responsibility. Last 2 bits. In the book, one of the new chapters, there's this drawing, and on one side of the page is a small circle labeled your comfort zone. And to the right is a much larger circle labeled where the magic happens. And the trick is finding an organization, which is why I asked Results and Citizens Climate Lobby, Peace Alliance isn't there, to be out here. I think the U.S. Fund for UNICEF is a U.S. fund. Yes, great. So I've been coaching the U.S. Fund for UNICEF. I think we're going to launch in February. So U.S. Fund for UNICEF is also out there. Groups that are offering this structure of support or will that'll help you get from your comfort zone over. Because if you don't have a group that's going to really support you, really coach you, do a little hand-holding and nurturing, you will not make it out of your comfort zone over to where the magic happens, which is really where we want to be, actually. So this is the last quote from George Bernard Shaw's Man and Superman. This is the true joy in life. The being used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one. The being a force of nature instead of a selfish, feverish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die. For the harder I work, the more I live. Life is no brief candle to me. It is a sort of splendid torch which I've got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. End of quote. And one more time. This is the true joy in life. The being used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one. The being a force of nature instead of a selfish, feverish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. Life is no brief candle to me. It is a sort of splendid torch which I've got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. End of quote. It's been a great honor to speak with you. I know what I've said can partially be this heavyweight. It's not intended to be. I really urge you, if you've got some kind of inkling, to find one of these groups or another. I don't suspect that there are tons of others that really will do the job when it comes to advocacy, but I really want to honor your being here because, and not walking out, because this is not, you know, the easiest set of topics. Like global poverty and political action, give me a break. And so I really honor your attention and your being here. So we're going to go to some comments or questions. We have room for complaints. Adlar, do we want to use this one too, or just that one? Okay. So if you have a question, I don't know, would it be smarter for people to just line up and, or you'll run around? No,
we just got a few, we got like 10 minutes for questions.
Okay, great.
So just a couple
great.
Questions.
So if you have a question or a comment, okay, this one was...
Oh, I had a comment also. Regarding...
Introduce yourself.
Okay, my name is Greg Hamra, and I am, along with Erica, who's waving over there, Grahowski, and John Van Leer in the front, who's waving now, co-leaders of the Miami chapter.
The brand new.
The brand new,
yeah.
Brand spanking new Miami chapter of CCL, Citizens Climate Lobby. Well, thank you. Well, thank him.
About a month or two old, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. We actually first met with my wife Alicia, by the way, right here as well, December 3rd, I think it was, downtown. Your quote is on my wife's desk and has been on my wife's desk for several months. She said, "This is the guy." And you know, we spoke a little bit before the program. I said, "Thanks for plugging CCL today on topical currents." I didn't realize the connection. Could you please, for me and the rest, explain your connection to Citizens Climate Lobby and explain why this is such an important organization. Now, I represent the U.S. Green Building Council, and I say that the Citizens Climate Lobby changes the game for every other smaller battle that we're fighting. Whether it's green building, energy efficiency, renewable energy, you put a price on carbon, it changes the game for everything else. That's my answer. What's yours?
Well, the connection, the question is, what's the connection between...
You started it out, you consulted with his...
I coached the founder and then the executive director over a 7-year period. So let me just say this. 3 years ago, I stopped being the head of the Microcredit Summit campaign and started the Center for Citizen Empowerment and Transformation, a group that coaches organizations to create these structures of support. Boy, has that been hard. Convincing organizations, they're really comfortable with the mouse clicks. Once you've set it up, it's not expensive. You don't really have to talk to anyone. And if you've got members who are discouraged, it's not your problem. You're just sending these mouse clicks out. So it's been really difficult, not like impossible. I'm coaching a number of other groups, but on creating these deeper structures of support. And so that's my gig these days, coaching organizations like CCL, and Real Results is more historic, and the U.S. Fund for UNICEF. I'm about to start with Friends Committee on National Legislation, I think soon with Children's Defense Fund, in giving their members more. There's a guy, Paul Loeb, who wrote The Soul of a Citizen. And he said, you know those petitions to Congress? They're counted, but they're also discounted. And, they know that it took about that much. And I'm not standing here saying, stop doing that. I'm just saying, don't stop there. Go deeper than that is the kind of thing. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Ellen Kempler, and I'm a results partner. I only have 6 cards with me, and I know I'm going to be just inundated. So for the rest of you, if you just went afterwards, come up to me with a piece of paper or something, I'll give you my phone number. Because the results group in Miami has done fabulous work. Ileana Rose-Layton and was a co-sponsor on a great bill that helped Muhammad Yunus get the Congressional Gold Medal. She was the Republican from the House. This was a day I will never forget. That was McConnell and Boehner and Reid and Pelosi together, all agreeing that microcredit was a brilliant way to help end poverty, small loans to very poor people. And as a result of my participation in results, I've gone to Bangladesh and come back, and with a friend, Kathleen Close, we started a microcredit nonprofit here in Miami, Partners for Self-Employment. So if you want to feel, the idea is to make poverty history. But the second and equally important goal, mission of results, is to break through the idea, I don't make a difference. And Sam, one of the things I was going to ask you to talk about a little bit is that second goal, in addition to addressing the poverty.
Yes, great. I wanted to show one other thing if I can find it. Yeah, and so Ellen, is Betsy here? Yes. Yeah, now, there's a table, right, Betsy? Yes. So if go to those tables if you want to either learn a little bit more or dive in, either one kind of thing, whether it's the results table or the U.S. Fund for UNICEF or Citizen Climate Lobby, et cetera. So go to those tables, even if Ellen's running out of cards, you can do more than that. So she asked about the second purpose. The first was to create the political will to end hunger and the worst aspects of poverty. The second now is to empower individuals to have breakthroughs in expressing their personal and political power. The second purpose is to empower individuals to have breakthroughs in expressing their personal and political power. And I wanted to go back to this, because if you notice, 1984, 41,000 deaths a day, 2014, 17,000 a day. The new goal is coming out with, in I think September, for 2030. I'm not sure if they're going to pick 2030 or 2035. The goal will be zero. The goal will be zero preventable child deaths by, I don't know if it's by 2030. Who wants the big game to play? Is that guaranteed? Absolutely not. I mean, if there's sufficient ignorance and apathy and discouragement, it won't happen. And so it's a perfectly brilliant time to get on the playing field. Is there another comment or question? Please go ahead. Who has the mic? We have one there. Okay, great.
Hello. I'm going to turn around this way. I'm Lori Baumel, Bachelor of Music, 1981. And also I was fortunate that Sam Harris was my high school music teacher.
Woo!
Who made a tremendous impact not only on my musicianship, but how I grew up during those years and how he taught me how to think. We had an expansion of consciousness class. We did yoga. We read Ken Kai's book on making a difference.
That was the 60s and 70s. Come
no,
on.
no. I graduated in '77. And there are so many stories. I can't tell you them. We don't have the time. Things that happen, like a musician wouldn't show up at 8 o'clock and Sam would say, well, actually, the pianist, the drummer, and the keyboardist, and the bass player didn't show up at 8 o'clock. And you go, I think I'll worry about it at 8:25. I'm not going to worry about it then. But they showed up at 8:20. And he just decided not to worry about it. Well, what is my point? Because we have very little time. My point is I told this story. I have 3 children, 28, 25, 22. One of which, after 30 years, I asked Sam to speak to one of my sons, who's maybe read some of his editorials in the Sun Sentinel now. He does work with the National Press Club, and he just started a job with the Department of Defense Health Agency. Who coached him via Skype for his interviews? Sam Harris. I haven't seen him in 30 years, but he's making the best of technology to continue to helping young people one at a time. Now, what is my point? My point is that planting a seed in me started a whole next generation of 3 children where advocacy, that white one, advocacy begins at the dinner table. From the very beginning, if you have children or grandchildren, you have to teach them what is important. And I will end it with what I told Sam when I said, it's so wonderful to hear your voice after 30 years, and I gave him a hug. I said I had one son protesting Wall Street on the landline, and I had the other son on the cell phone protesting the XL pipeline, and I just kept saying, don't get arrested. Please don't get arrested. It will ruin your chances. And so my bottom line is advocacy begins in the home. Start with talking to your children. Tell them what you heard tonight. I hate to push the book, but have them read the book. Read them a chapter in the book. Read this section. I read your book from 20 years ago. Now I have to read it again. Tell them about George Bernard Shaw. Tell them about a mentor who helped you, like Sam did with me growing up. One last thing. I published 6 music pieces. In high school, he saw, and this lady was our drama director, Ellen Davis, and Sam saw that I had a spark in me that I could compose, and very rarely were there female jazz arrangers. He arranged for someone from the University of Miami, a doctoral program composition student, to come to the high school and taught 3 other students he would take. Now, in 1976, this was a lot of money. He would take a crisp $20 bill out of his wallet, out of his paycheck, hand it to the fellow who was teaching us, and say, teach these kids how to arrange. And I was one of these children, and I have 6 publications now. So this is just one big major thank you.
Thanks a lot.
And just advocate, advocate, advocate.
Okay, great. So, Thank you so much for being here. I'll be by the books. The tables are out there. It's been great that you're here. I'm really grateful. Have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you. On behalf of the University of Miami Alumni Association, please accept this gift for all your support and leadership of the University of Miami. I'm sure Sam will be around to answer questions afterwards. Thank you for being with us.